Hi everyone, I'm Ixalan, and it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Today, we're going to look at cards from Ixalan. It's a good time to do a retrospective on that particular set because Lost Caverns of Ixalan was just released. This MTG Top 10 is sponsored by Wizards of the Coast as part of the Ambassador program. If you'd like to get your hands on Lost Caverns of Ixalan product, check out the description and use my special link. The original Ixalan set was released in September of 2017, and it was our first visit to the plane. It's modeled after the so-called Age of Discovery, when people from Europe first became aware of the Americas. In particular, Ixalan is modeled after Mesoamerica. Original Ixalan was very focused on a typal theme with dinosaurs and merfolk representing the original residents of the area, with the pirates and vampires being outsiders. To be eligible for this list, a card had to receive its original printing in Ixalan. In all, there are 245 cards eligible for this video, and in it we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like regional championships. Alright, let's take a look at the top 10 cards from Ixalan. At number 10, it's Rampaging Ferocidon. For 2 generic and a red, the Ferocidon is a 3/3 with Menace that shuts off life gain, and anytime another creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. Obviously enough, the Ferocidon is an excellent aggressive creature. It has nice stats and can do a ton of incidental damage. It was so excellent, in fact, that it got banned in Standard, since it gave you a great aggro creature that completely turned off life gain, which is usually one of the main counters against red aggro decks. Mono red aggro decks ended up dominating the format thanks to the Ferocidon, resulting in that ban. These days it sees play in red aggro decks in Pioneer, and it is likely to keep gaining points in that format going forward, and it'll probably move higher on the list. At number 9, it's Legion's Landing. Most of the double-face cards in original Ixalan represent exploration by one of the set's factions, and then, when you meet some requirement, they transform into a land. In other words, the efforts paid off and they found what they were looking for. In this case, for 1 white mana, you get a legendary enchantment that makes a 1/1 vampire token with lifelink. If you attack with 3 or more creatures, it transforms into Adanto, the First Fort, a legendary land that can tap for white, and you can also pay 2 generic and a white to make vampire tokens. Aggro decks can usually transform Legion's Landing without a whole lot of effort, and once they do, they have a great mana sink ability. It's gained points in aggro decks in both Standard and Pioneer. This included decks like White Weenie, Boros aggro, Selesnya aggro, and Orzhov aggro. It's still seeing play in Pioneer right now, and it's another card with a great chance to move up the list. At number 8, it is Arguel's Bloodfast. This legendary enchantment costs 1 and a black, and you can also pay 1 generic and a black and 2 life to draw a card. Then, if your life total is 5 or below, during your upkeep, it transforms into Temple of Aklazats, a legendary land that can tap for black, and you can also tap it and sacrifice a creature to gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. The two sides synergize together quite impressively, as you can be pretty reckless with the fast when you know you'll be getting back some of that life later after it transforms. During its time in Standard, it was played primarily in aggro decks. One of the biggest problems for aggro decks can be running out of gas against an opponent who makes a game go too long. Standard aggro decks ran Bloodfast in the sideboard as it gave them a way to make sure they could keep pressuring their opponent thanks to extra cards. The Fast also has a single Pro Tour top 8 in Pioneer where it was played in a Dimir Inverter deck. That deck eventually got banned out of the format though, and it doesn't have points anywhere since 2020, so it's pretty likely to be passed by the 2 cards we've already looked at. At number 7, it's Kitesail Freebooter. For 1 generic and a black, it's a 1/2 flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, you look at your opponent's hand and exile a non-creature, non-land from it, and it remains exiled until the freebooter leaves the battlefield. This makes it a very disruptive 2-drop. Your opponent does have the ability to get the card back, of course, but even if they manage to, the disruption generated by the freebooter is valuable. It didn't do a ton in Standard, but it was a key card in modern human decks between 2017 and 2022. This deck was based around the human creature type, of course, and many of its creatures had disruptive effects, like the freebooter. That kind of thing made it a lot harder for your opponent to find a way to defend themselves against your onslaught of creatures. However, human decks haven't been a major factor in Modern since about 2019, and they haven't really been a factor at all since 2022. The freebooter also has a single point from a Pioneer Humans deck, but it doesn't really have a home right now in any format, and it seems inevitable it will fall further down the list in the future. At number 6, it is Search for Azcanta. For 1 generic and a blue, you get a legendary enchantment that lets you surveil 1 at the beginning of your upkeep. Then if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, it transforms into Azcanta Sunken Ruin, a legendary land that can tap for blue, and you can also pay 2 generic and a blue to look at the top 4 cards of your library, and you can reveal a non-creature, non-land card and put it into your hand, while the rest go to the bottom of your library. That's a pretty amazing mana sink that is basically always going to net you a very real card. Search has primarily been played in control decks, which makes sense, as those decks run very few creatures, can make the game go long enough to easily transform Search, and they are basically guaranteed to hit a card every time they activate the land. It's been a fixture in standard, Pioneer, and modern control decks, and it's also found a bit of success in Legacy Miracles. These decks are the best at getting value out of the Search for Azcanta side of the card, because they seek to cast cards for their miracle cost, and Search lets you manipulate the top card of your library enough to increase the chances of that happening. It's going to keep gaining points in the future. At number 5, it is Settle the Wreckage. For 2 generic and 2 white, this instant exiles all attacking creatures target player controls, and then that player can search their library for that many basic lands, put those onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Obviously enough, this card brutally punishes any deck for swinging with their whole board. While you get some lands out of the deal, that's not usually going to do enough to make up for your whole board getting exiled. It has seen frequent play in control decks in Standard, Pioneer, and Modern, as it effectively spells doom for any aggro deck. It's likely to gain more points in the future. At number 4, it is Unclaimed Territory. When this land enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. It can tap for colorless mana, or it can tap for 1 mana of any color for creatures of the chosen type. In other words, if you're a typal deck, Territory gives you amazing mana fixing. From the minute it was printed, Territory really powered up typal decks in multiple formats, as they suddenly had easy access to more colors of mana. The most notable of these decks was Modern Humans, as the release of Ixalan led to the birth of the deck, as the set featured both Unclaimed Territory and Kitesail Freebooter, which we saw earlier. Territory, when combined with Cavern of Souls and Ancient Ziggurat, made it very easy to build a 5-color human deck, giving the deck access to the best humans in the game, without much of a cost associated with it. While human decks have fallen by the wayside in Modern, the Territory also sees play in Modern Goblins and Legacy and Pioneer humans, and it's going to keep gaining points in the future. At number 3, it is Vraska's Contempt. For 2 generic and 2 black, it's an instant that exiles a creature or planeswalker, and you gain 2 life. Removal with life gain tacked on feels pretty good, because it makes you feel a lot safer than you were before it resolved. The fact it exiles its target definitely matters too, as keeping that creature or planeswalker from ever coming back is pretty important. It gained all of its points in Standard, where it tended to appear in just about any black deck. However, when it comes to other 60-card formats, it hasn't been played a whole lot, as formats with larger card pools just have access to far more efficient removal. As a result, Contempt doesn't have any points since 2020, and some of the more active cards on the list are going to pass it in the future. At number 2, it is Sorceress Spyglass. This 2-mana artifact lets you look at your opponent's hand and then choose a card name. The card with the chosen name can't have its activated abilities activated unless they are mana abilities. The Spyglass quickly proved to be an important card in all of Magic's formats, as activated abilities are a huge problem in pretty much all of them. While it costs twice as much as Pithing Needle, the bonus of getting to see your opponent's hand before you make your decision is a big deal. The Spyglass also just got a new standard legal reprint in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, so I think it's a safe bet to think it will gain many more points in the future. However, there is one card ahead of it, and similarly, the minute it was printed in Ixalan, it started to see play everywhere, and it still sees a ton of play. And that card is Field of Ruin. This land can tap for colorless, and you can also pay 2 generic and sacrifice it to destroy a non-basic land. Then your opponent searches their library for a basic land and puts it on the battlefield. So, like Sorceress Spyglass, Field of Ruin is a hate piece, one that is great against powerful lands. In some metagames, you'll also encounter people who aren't playing very many basic lands, in which case it sometimes turns into Strip Mine. While it doesn't see as much play in the Eternal formats as the Spyglass, because those formats have access to more powerful lands that can destroy other lands, Field of Ruin sees a colossal amount of play in all of the other formats, and that's going to continue. It has more than double the score of Sorceress Spyglass, so I think it will remain number 1 on this list for the foreseeable future. So, those are the top 10 cards from Ixalan. If you want to get your hands on cards from the new Ixalan set, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, use my special link in the description. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to catch up on past videos, including many more MTG top 10s that look at specific sets, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.